Alright, here we go. We are beginning character animation 1. Rather inauspicious beginning to a long, beautiful journey in animation. The blank screen with the grid. Now, if you cannot get the grid to appear on your screen, you're having any trouble with that, this is the button you want. Alright, now what we're going to start off with is a piece of work that it's something that every aspiring animator should grow accustomed to, and that is the bouncing ball. Now, bouncing a ball around is not really a heck of a lot of fun, and most animators get sick of this assignment, but it really is the best way to simply demonstrate the basic concepts involved in character animation, and just as important in this day and age, the basic concepts of animating in Maya. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the bouncing ball as a means to most easily demonstrate to you the basic tools you're going to need to do character animation with. Now there aren't really that many that you need to get a lot done. So we're going to start off with those, and then as we go through, we'll open things up a little bit more. But right now we'll just get started with the basics. All right, so we're going to bounce a ball. So what we need is a ball. We're going to create NURBS primitive sphere. There we go. I'm left mouse dragging on the grid. There's our ball. Okay, now the basic elements you need to manipulate this thing easily and quickly are the channel box over here on the right. That can be found by clicking right on this strange little thing here. That's a channel box and a layer editor down there. We'll get into layers later, so it's not really necessary, but it doesn't hurt to have it there. Or if you want just the channel box, you can do that. It's also under UI elements, I believe. There it is. So you can choose it that way if you want. Oops, I just unchose it. So let's choose it again. UI elements, channel box. There we go. Okay, so there's our channel box. That's the basic lowdown on whatever's selected, which will be highlighted in green, will show up in the channel box. That's your easiest way to see what you got and what you're working with. Now, if this is, by the way, this is my right out of the box. I haven't made any modifications to it. I tend not to modify things too much in my character animation. Is a very, very untechnical pursuit. So, generally speaking, keeping things simple and clean works just fine. As you go through your own journey and your own process, you will no doubt find your own way to do things. And as you probably already know by now, there are a million different ways to do everything in Maya. I say pick the one that works for you and stick with it. Or as I also like to say, there are basically 9 buttons you use over and over and over again to animate. But yeah, so that is the first one. That is the channel box. If your sphere is not showing up gray, that may be a function of what kind of mesh you've got going. So if you hit F4, I'm sorry, if you hit 4, that's going to make it transparent. If you hit 5, that's gonna bring up the ball itself, so you can actually see it in space. All right, now I'm Alt left mousing to move all the way around it. That's how you get your view all the way around whatever you're animating. And that little box in the corner is very helpful for seeing exactly what's cooking. All right, now if you do Alt middle mouse, that's going to move it in space, left and right, and up and down. And if you Alt right, that's going to bring it right in. And F will center it perfectly. So if you Alt left mouse, you get a perfect, easy spin around it so you can see everything. Now, for a ball, it doesn't make sense, but when we get into more complicated models, it's really going to be helpful for you to see from all sides of your animation, so you know that your shapes are good, your balance is good, etc., etc. All right. Okay, the next thing we're going to take a look at is the timeline, and that's right down here at the bottom. If you're not seeing it, you can always go Display, UI Elements, Time Slider. Okay, same thing. I'm not going to click it because I made that mistake before. But anyway, that's what it is. That determines the length of the shot you're working on. At the moment, it's 24 frames. Maya tends to go at either 24 or 30 frames a second, depending on what it's set to. So this is at the most a second, which is pretty fast. So I think to really show this bouncing ball, we want to give it at least 2 or 3 seconds. So let's try 3 seconds. That's 72 frames. So if you go down to that little box there, there's 72. Now our range is 72, and this little thing down here is the range slider. So it's only got up to 24, but we can open that up to the full 72. So now we're working with this shot. We're working with a length of 72 frames, and let's just start bouncing it. All right. So the first thing we want to do is set a key. So we want to go to frame 1. Now there are different ways to set a key. You can do it in the channel box. If you want to just set a key of whichever whatever element you're going to use. Let's say I'm going to start translating, and translate is how it moves in space. Now there are a couple different ways to translate things. If I click this and then middle mouse drag it, it's going to translate in X, which is to say translating in X tends to be left and right. So for a character who's walking, translating in X will be sort of left and right as somebody sort of swaggers as they walk. Translate Z is going forwards and backwards, and translate Y is going up and down. Now I'm doing that by middle mouse dragging on what's highlighted in here, but also if I want to, I can grab the little arrows there, which are also represented. They can be found on the W on your keyboard. That's the hotkey. So W will bring up the arrows. That's how you can move it around. E will bring up the little circle. That's how you can rotate it. You can also see it's rotating in Z over my channel box over there too. And then R is scale. If I grab that middle, if I grab the green, it's going to scale in Y, which is due north, etc. If I grab the middle and left mouse drag, it's going to scale all three simultaneously. All right, so again, a zillion ways to do everything. I usually either between the channel box or the actual item itself, that's usually sufficient for anything I need to do in Maya. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this back to 1, so it's just normal size. And now I'm going to bring up my 4-window viewer so I can see not only all around this, but so I can see it from each of these orthographic views. Now that's right over here. It's that little 4 box right there. Now we can see everything. 5, 5, 5. So now we have a sense of what it looks like. So if I'm going to translate something in Y, let's just make this rotate Z0 so it all is nice and tidy. Okay, so if I'm going to translate something in Y, for this panel here, it's going to go due north. So you can see it's going due north, but now we're not seeing it from the top view here because in Maya there's no real perspective from the orthographic views. So that ball is going up and down. We just can't see it because we're right on top of it. Okay. So now first thing we want to do is set a key. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose all of these. And I can, if I right click and hold it, then I can key select it. So that's going to put a key on all these things because they're all selected. And that's going to turn it yellow. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is turn on my auto key. Now that's down here, click that, it's red. Now what that means is any change I make is automatically going to be saved as a key, and to me that helps my workflow a lot. So you sort of get used to the idea that anything you make, it's there. You can always Control Z to change, to take back anything you make, any mistake you make, but essentially it just really helps speed up the workflow. And I find that as new packages come out, the default setting tends to be with auto key on. Okay, so let's go back. We will zero out the translates, so they're right at the middle. Now because auto key is on, I've made that change. That's where that thing's sitting. So right now there is a key on frame 1. So it's just doing nothing. It's just sitting there. We're not going to get a whole lot out of it. Let's bounce this baby. So now if I want to put another key of all these things on, say, frame 33, working with odd numbers tends to be easier because we're going to be subdividing this mathematically. So 1 plus 32 is 33, and 32 is an easily divisible number. So for walk cycles, bouncing things, default things where there's no established timing, I find that working in this way is very helpful. All right, so now I'm here. Another way I can key everything is just by pressing S for set key. So now you'll notice there's that little red stripe there on the timeline. That means there's a key on frame 1. If I hit S, there's now going to be shoop, a key on frame 33. All right, so we've got a key on frame 1 and a key on frame 33, and we can always scrub through the timeline just by grabbing the little marker there and moving. Now you'll see there's nothing's moving in there because we haven't animated anything. We just set 2 keys in the same place, so there's going to be no motion. So this is as good a time as any to bring up your best friend, your secret weapon, and the all-time greatest computer animation tool ever, and that is the Graph Editor. All right, the Graph Editor. Here we go. Window, Animation Editors, Graph Editor. You will use this always. Make it your friend. The Graph Editor is essentially a mathematical representation on a grid of the animation you've got going through time and through space. Time is the numbers on the bottom from left to right, 24 frames, 48, etc., etc., etc. Space are the vertical numbers 0 and up. Now you move through the Graph Editor the same way you move in the windows. That is to say, Alt right mouse will zoom in and out. Alt middle mouse will move it around. There's no Alt left mouse because you don't need to move around in space to see it. It's just on a flat grid. Now, if you want to try to zoom into just one particular curve, if you highlight it just by left mousing over it, F will frame it, of course, and Alt Shift middle and left mouse drag to the left and right will squeeze it in and stretch it east west, and the same thing Alt Shift left middle, got it? Going north south, going up and down, will stretch it north south. Now there's not a lot of stretching going on, it's just a straight line, but you will see how this works when the curves get crazy. Okay, so in our translates, if you'll notice, we have they're keyed here. I'm just gonna highlight it, press F. We've got our key at frame 1 and our key at frame 33, so that's our time. In space, there's nothing happening because a flat line east-west represents no movement and no change. Okay, so now to actually get this ball bouncing, what we can do is we can go midway between frame 1, frame 33, which is 17. We can pick everything here, key selected. Now, to get a ball bouncing due north-south, that's translate Y. So why don't we can by clicking in this window and hitting the space bar, then we get just this window, and that will work. If you hit space bar again, you get all 4. Whichever one you click, you can get a big window of, and you just space bar back and forth between each of them. So just for the heck of it, we'll go back to the main window. Okay, now click on the thing to highlight it. We're at 17. Let's Alt right mouse to pull out a little bit, and let's just drag up in Y until we get to a point where we feel pretty good. That's 11. There we go. Okay, 23. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so now using the arrow keys to the right of your M on your keyboard, that's how you can toggle between keys. So if I go left arrow, that's key 1, key 17, key 33. Now is a good time to talk about the kind of lines we've got. If you look on the Graph Editor here, you can see that now we have a line that's moving around a little bit. That's our translate Y. That's the only animation we've got. Okay, so we can see as we move through it that that ball, let's see, there we go, that ball is basically going to go up like that until it reaches its apex here, and then we'll start to come back down again. And you can see pretty clearly in this case how the line going up on translate Y translates directly to how that ball is moving in space. Okay, so right now we've gone up and down in 33 frames, so why don't we just shorten our range slider to, we actually want to shorten it to 32 because 33 and 1 are the same. And when something loops, once it comes around, we don't want this same key to be repeating twice. So anytime you're going to do a cycle of any kind, you want to cut off that last frame. So now, if we just play it, you sort of get a sense of a bounce, right? It's very simple. Now, this is a perfect opportunity of seeing how tangents work. If you look up here, you'll see these little handles here. Those represent tangents, and they represent how the curves will work. Okay, now if we want this animation to be smooth and even, what we would do is flatten these two tangents. Now the best way to flatten tangents is to highlight them and press the flat bar there. Okay, so now what we're going to get is a smooth, easy motion through the cycle. See, there's nothing punchy about it. There's nothing choppy. It's just going up and down. Very computery, not very impressive for animation. Okay, so now, and just to get a sense of how that's going to work through time, if we select all this and if we go curves, post infinity, cycle, and then view infinity, you can see that dashed line. That's nothing I've animated, but that's just this cycle repeating. So now what that means is that will go as long as I open up this shot. If I open this thing up to 500 frames and open the range slider all the way to 500 frames, that thing's just going to bounce all the way through until the end of time. Okay, not necessary, but what the heck. So that sort of thing is generally helpful for the purpose of animating cycles, but you still get the same effect by having the cycle just loop repeatedly in the time frame here. Okay, so that's the basics of how lines on the graph relate to how things move in space. Now this concept is a little weird to wrap your head around when you apply it to character animation. But basically, once you are able to connect how lines on a grid relate to how things move through space and how things rotate in space, how they scale and everything, that really is the biggest key to finding your way to really move quickly through the software to become a great animator. So we will definitely talk about this more as we go through it, but that is the basic concept involved. All right, let's talk about tangent types, curve types, and how those affect animation. Now to do that, we've got our bouncing ball here, and I've made another one for comparison's sake. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up both balls to bounce the same way, and then we're going to show how the manipulation of curve types and tangents affects the motion of the ball as it bounces. Okay, so we're going to start here on frame 1. We're going to pick everything, right mouse, key selected. Then we're going to go out to 33 frames, and again we can either do key selected or hit S to key it. And now we want to turn auto key on, so that way anytime we make any changes it's automatically going to key. Here I'm going to hit S again at 17 at the midpoint, and then we're going to go for, we'll just translate it in Y up to, whatever, up to 9 say, okay? So now we want to do the same thing with this guy. Go here, key everything there, key everything here, key everything here, and then this translate Y is going to be 9 as well. So now if we look at the curve types here, right now they're just interpolating normally. That one is, and that. They both get the same kind of interpolation. Now, as we play through it, we can see that they're both bouncing in the same way. It's not a very pretty bounce. It looks kind of mechanical, etc. So let's manipulate this line a little bit to see what it does. Now, in the case of this guy, if we were to highlight this and then pick linear, that line's going to be straight, which means that it's going to be even more mechanical. There's going to be no speeding up or slowing down whatsoever. It's just purely constant speed, kind of like a freight elevator or a robot or what have you. So it's fairly similar to the other one, but you can see that there are parts where they meet up at the top, but because this ball here has that smoother interpolation coming down, it's staying up at its apex a little bit longer than this one is, and then won't catch up with it until it gets back to the bottom. Okay, so now if we want to do, say, a linear interpolation, oops, I did that with the wrong one. Let's if we want to do a linear interpolation, then that's this one here, flat, and what that means is that all the lines are smooth. So that means that the guy on the left is going to be kind of like a waveform. And once again, since it's a cycle, we want to cut it off before that last key so there's not any repeating of keys going on. So you can see that sort of takes the bounce out of it because there's no sense of impact. Now if we wanted to have this scene be longer, we can stretch as long as we want, as long as we've got it repeating through infinity. So what we want to do is highlight the curve, pick post-infinity cycle, and then curves pre-infinity cycle, and then view infinity. So now we can see that this thing's going to bounce forever. This is a dotted line because it hasn't actually been keyed, it's just a loop. So that's in case you need to run a cycle for longer than just your normal frame range will allow. Okay, so that's a flat tangent. This is stepped, and you can see what that's going to do. That's only going to show the keys. So when we play it like this, you can see what that does. Basically, what you see is what you get. And once you have your sense of how these different types of lines move through the keys, that'll really be one of the fundamental building blocks on which you're going to base your animation and your concepts of keying things out. Stepped keys are very important for blocking animation. They're kind of a throwback to traditional animation when all we could do was roll between the keys on paper, so all you could see was one and then the other. And I recommend it highly as a learning device for learning how to train your eye to see the way characters, what have you, move through keys, so you can develop your sense of that. So, but still, we still have, neither of these balls is a very good looking bouncing ball. So what we want to do is we want to make this little guy a good looking bouncing ball. And in order to do that, we're going to have to go to spline tangents here. Now this is getting close to what there we go, to what a bounce looks like. But given that, given the law of gravity, what that says is that gravity and inertia, well, I suppose gravity is a form of inertia, which the law of inertia states that a body in motion will continue in motion on a straight line until something comes along to alter that. So in this case, the straight line is north and south, and so in the case of it going up, that's gravity. That's slowing it, is the force that's slowing it down, and in the case of it going down, that's gravity, is the force that's speeding it up until the ground stops it and bounces it back up. But if you look at this line, it's not all speeding up, because the deeper or the steeper the grade, the faster the drop. And as we can see here, it starts to speed up a little bit, then it hits that line and it goes straight like that, which is why it doesn't really look like a bounce. So in order to do this, to really get this feel, what we're going to want to do is affect this tangent here. And so if I highlight this weight here, press W for translate, now I can middle mouse and move this thing around. And so now when I do that here and here, now when I get a shape like that, now I'm starting to get a feel of a real bounce. It's kind of that McDonald's arches kind of look. So now we can see how the ball on the left is starting to feel more like what a ball really feels like when it bounces than the one on the right, which still looks a little bit mechanical. And so this is not only a lesson in tangents and curve types, but also in how spacing really affects animation. Because when you look at this, both these curves, both this one and this one have the same timing. The timing is the distance of the keys from each other. They both have a key on 1, key on 17, and a key on 33, and the keys are all the same. But since I've altered these lines, that affects the spacing. And so now the spacing gets bigger as it goes down, and that shows the effects of gravity and what spacing is really all about. So now when we look back, we can tell which ball is bouncing and which ball is mechanical. Now, if you wanted to, if you wanted to make the bouncing ball without using the the cycle infinity, what we would do is we would, let's say we're just going to do 2 cycles, 1, 33, and 65. So we set this other key here. We can take this key on 17, middle mouse drag to 49. Set that key, that's going to copy that key there at the top. And so now we've got the makings we've got the keys in place, but the tangents still need work. This tangent can be fixed like this, but as we see here, this tangent here is spline, and so it's going to follow this interpolation through. And so in order to get this bounce here, we need to break this tangent. And the way we do that is by hitting this guy right here, right there. That's a break tangent. So once I break that, one half is blue, the other half is brown. I can grab the brown one, pull it back up, and then sort of get it the way I like it. So now we can see that we've animated 2 bounces. The effect is still going to be the same, but now we're more in control of how much bouncing we want to actually animate and how much we want to leave to the computer to cycle for us. Okay, so that's kind of the gist of tangents, spacing, etc. And now we're going to take these concepts and we are going to apply them to all the animation we do from here on out.